Hello everyone, welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I am Richard Carlton here with all sorts of other people here, as we can see right here. Heidi Porter, one of the guest speakers today at our exciting 1 o'clock broadcast. Every day, Monday through Friday, 1 o'clock, we are broadcasting live stream on the FileMaker platform, bringing you all sorts of great materials, things for you to learn, things for us to learn. Sometimes you do something amazing and we get to see all that. It's very exciting. And then, of course, we're going to have a lot of interaction today. So it's a 2-day action-packed broadcast, so today and tomorrow. And so let's talk about the upcoming broadcast schedule. I'm going to press the button there real quick. This is right. If you go to fmtrain.tv, you can check out the upcoming broadcast schedule. If I zoom in here a little bit, if it'll let me. There we go. And so this shows you data right out of our FileMaker system. We're doing ransomware, the dangers of people who are trying to attack your FileMaker servers. Even as we speak, your FileMaker servers are under assault. Your network is under assault, and that'll be the conversation for the next couple days. Next week, we're going to be taking the week off of live streams. We do not be expecting to be broadcasting next week. We'll be picking up the following week. As a reminder, if you want to support the channel, definitely check out our training bundles right here, which include all our training and other amazing items, including a customized CRM, etc., things like that. So that is our training bundles right here. This supports the channel. We greatly appreciate all of you who maintain that. So let's talk about today's action-packed broadcast. So I'm Richard, and this is Heidi, and there are other people here. This is Chris. Let's say hi, Chris. There's Chris waving right there. And this is Wim. Wim has never been here before. Wim is one of the illustrious leaders of Soliant. They've got a top-notch team of FileMaker developers, and they are, Wim does a lot of things for the FileMaker community, a lot of knowledge, a lot of training, typically on the deeper end of the pool, the real tech end of it. And so it reminds me a lot of our Jacob Taylor. For those of you who know our Jacob, mentioned a more experienced Jacob Taylor, that's Wim. And so he is here to work with these folks in talking about ransomware. So I'm going to start off by just asking the question to Heidi and to Chris. How did you folks get on this topic? Because I know that Heidi and Chris have gone to the DEF CON, which is a hacker kind of conference in Las Vegas before. Is that how this started?
We were all at the waiting room at the dentist. Not really.
So yeah, so tell us who you are and how did you get to this topic, and what are you guys doing the next couple of days?
So Chris and I started, well, first of all, we had a client ransomware in 2016 or 15, can't remember exactly. And that made us really start to think, and we had a backup, so you know they didn't pay the ransom, but about the wider security outside of the FileMaker platform and how we needed to learn a lot more. And so in 2017, DEF CON it always is in Las Vegas, but it was the same week as DevCon was in Phoenix. So we went to DEF CON right after DevCon in Phoenix. And, we went 2017, 2018, and, ransomware was mentioned, but it wasn't, this story of the year. And this year we went, and it was mentioned in like every single session. And so when we were looking at going to pause, in October, where we saw you there, Richard, and we thought, ransomware would be a good topic, and it'd be fun, to not fun, but fun to simulate this and look at ways to protect, etc. And we started talking about this to people about, what do you think about us doing a ransomware session? And Wim was like, pick me, I want to take down a server. I'm the Punisher, and offered to help. And our feeling is that it's a team effort to protect and recover and respond to ransomware attacks. And so this kind of team effort went into us preparing this session for pause, and then kind of doing these sessions amongst the community to give awareness. And the other thing about this whole ransomware thing, catchy word, ransomware, etc. But a lot of the things you look at when you look at ransomware and responding, recovering, protecting, et cetera, they apply to, if your server gets wiped away by a tornado, which we also had a client, have happen. A lot of it applies to other situations with your FileMaker server and calamities. So anything to add there, Chris or Wim?
I can reinforce that last bit, right? So everything that we are going to talk about today and tomorrow, a lot of it applies to just basic disaster recovery and business continuity. Except that perhaps with ransomware attacks being on the rise, it becomes a little more urgent to think about these things. But the thought process in how to make sure that you can continue if something happens to you is exactly the same as some of the things we've been talking about for years. So it'll be a good recap.
Good. Yeah, well, they originally was going to be a one-day event, but I think I'm expecting questions. So all of you who are here, Bobino, David, Drew, Foxy Jack, Gadidi, Jake, Jericho, Ken, Kyle, Larry, Labo, Monkey Spread, Peter Geens is there, Ruben, Scott, Gary's there, and then on the YouTube side, there's more of you, Michael, Gravel, Martin, a bunch of other folks who are lurking on Twitch. They tend to lurk on Twitch and not identify themselves. So,
well, ask them how many have had a ransomware attack or know someone who has.
Okay, yeah, we'll ask. Well, they can all hear you. If you've been ransomware attacked, let us know that you've let us know what happened with that. Canberra just said sort of a topic question: has FileMaker ever been, quote, red teamed, a team that actually tries to hack in some system or request of the owners, right? So that's a question from Canberra. That's our Sandia Lab security guy, right? So,
yeah, Chris, you talked to someone about this, didn't you?
Did I talk to someone about this?
I thought you did. Uh-huh.
I thought that in the recent security talk we did with the whole SOC 2 compliance that they indicated that, and they were a little, vague about the specifics, but I thought a pen test had been done, I presume against Claris Connect, but I didn't get a lot of detail. But my understanding is they have engage those services at some level.
Well, my understanding also is that someone we know who was ransomware, their company did bring in a pen tester and found FileMaker server to be pretty secure. Isn't that the case? Or
yes, that's a completely different thing. This was specifically about Claris, but yes, the over in the EU, former EU in some cases, yes, they had a pen tester come in and try and attack a FileMaker server, and FileMaker server was pretty hard to take down.
Good. Well, and I don't know it'll always be that way, but it's good that it is for the moment. So where do you guys want to start? Who's starting off here? The presentation you guys are going to launch here?
We have a slide deck, and we can go through that. I mean, we did this a week or two ago with the FM Disk people, and we were pretty time constrained, but we got a bunch of stuff going on here. So there's a ton of content that would probably be useful to get out of the slide deck just because it's hard to remember it all. So it helps us, hit all the bases that we want to hit. But also, this hasn't been just a joint effort to create a presentation. This has also been a joint research effort. So we found a ransomware framework, and Wim's been doing a deep dive onto that and actually standing up a ransomware simulator to attack a FileMaker server and kind of see what's been going on there. Heidi's been working on a rootkit and has been researching ways to hide FileMaker databases from ransomware by modifying a rootkit. So we have like an R&D portion of the program that may take some time. So our thinking was that we would cover mostly our slide content today, and then tomorrow we would get into a deep dive on some of the R&D Skunkworks projects we've been working on.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I saw the beginning of Wim's ransomware. It wasn't really, well, it's a simulator in so much only that he told his attack not to kill anyone, right? But it was like the real deal, right? He said, be careful with what did you say? Be careful with live bullets or something like that if you play with them. Ask Alex Baldwin, right? Live bullets in a simulator, bad news. So, all right, well, cool. All right, well, everyone's here watching. We got a lot of people watching, so off you guys go.
Let me just do a quick preamble, and that is that, ransomware has been all over the news, not just today, but over the last couple of years. And for a long time, it seemed like this was sort of advancing and compounding unchecked. And that has changed a little bit recently. And we can touch on that towards the end here. But I guess our concern is that it's been in the news so much that, people start to tune it out and it just becomes noise. And that's a mistake to discount this as something that's not pertinent or relevant to people with FileMaker deployments. And so our goal today and tomorrow is to convince everybody that this is a true threat to FileMaker deployments. It's growing rapidly, and that just because you haven't been hit yet doesn't mean you never will be, and that you're bulletproof. And that sort of the most important takeaway is to remember that a ransomware attack is a crime of extortion. And so with extortion, they try and apply leverage to you. And these days, it's not just about, locking up your servers and your networks and denying you the use of your computer infrastructure, but they also try and exfiltrate your sensitive data and threaten you with publication of that. This happened to Sony a few years ago. If you guys remember that, they were saying, hey, we're going to leak your scripts and your movies and stuff like that. And so they will try and get you to pay money by locking up your gear and your hardware and encrypting important files so you can't conduct business. Your data will be taken out. They will threaten to publish it. If they can figure out who your customers are, they will contact your customers and say, hey, we have all your commerce data with this vendor of yours. We're going to publish that unless you twist their arm to get them to do it. So this is very a multi-front attack. And so it is vitally important that, the FileMaker developers here do their bit to make sure that if a database is exfiltrated, that it can't be broken into. And so the most important thing you can do right now, and the easiest thing, is to turn on encryption at rest. If the database gets exfiltrated or a backup gets exfiltrated and it's encrypted, they're not going to be able to break into it. So that's one thing. Another thing is this idea of immutable backups. And we'll get into that in more detail, but the long and the short of it is this is a backup that cannot be modified. So if they try and encrypt the backup, it's basically locked and it prevents encryption. This is a feature of some cloud services. None of this will guarantee your safety or make sure that you won't get hit by ransomware, but it can mitigate some of these factors that they use to try and leverage you. And so with that, very reassuring preamble out of the way, I'm going to let Heidi get into what we're going to talk about here.
Okay, so we can do this two ways, and we can just decide when we get there based on time. But just going to go through kind of what's been happening in the wider world as ransomware and the mechanics of attack, and some recovery scenarios, and then Wim has an actual ransomware simulation. And then we'll go through some protection things that we're looking at. And, a through line to this is that thinking about how you're going to not just protect, but respond and recover is really important, so that you can, react more calmly and recover from these kind of things, whether it's a ransomware or whether it's some other kind of failure. So the big thing is that and we got this question, I think, on a recent talk, has anyone ever ransomed a FileMaker server? And yes. In fact, when we kept bringing up this subject, like, would this be interesting, we heard a bunch of people, because it's like a lot of things. It's underreported. There's a little bit of worry about reputational damage or shame, et cetera. And so it's underreported. The other thing is people hear about ransomware like the Colonial Pipeline, and I can't remember the other big one. And the thing is, I don't know how many people know, but the Colonial Pipeline situation, that was bad vetting by the ransomware company. Like they didn't want to go after something where the government's going to come after them and get part of their money back off the exchange. They want to go after smaller, medium businesses or hospitals, places that, the government, might not have the resources to come after them. I've seen, like small rural towns being attacked. They want to go after, a quick return on investment something that's lower risk for them. And the thing is, if you look at this slide, it's a great, we didn't mention this in the slide, but it's a fantastic business model. Like, these people make a ton of money. They can, you talk about marketing, they can just market on the dark web. They can get someone we know in the community has been at, if you pass this on to client, you get this much money. It's an easy way for people to make money. You have a, Chris, I don't think you mentioned this, the disgruntled employee, they can hire someone to attack you. It's just it's scary how profitable it is, how easy it is for people to, hire it as a service. And so the best you can do is to, kind of look at some ways to make speed bumps for the different, there's different levels of ransomware organizations, and if you can put some speed bumps, some of them will be deterred. Some of the more sophisticated ones, if you can put more speed bumps, maybe they go to the next house. Just like if you have, you have cats, Richard, but, say you had, six big cats, and they made a lot of noise. They're going to go to the next house, right? Because your cats are so scary.
Yes.
Or maybe just because you're scary. I don't know. But
I'm scary too, but yes.
Yeah. And so, the goal is, to think of ways to put speed bumps in the way, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Anything else on here I forgot?
Well, I just wanted, you guys are kind of skimming through this real quick. So for those of you, and I have not talked about this on the live stream. So there's various, the business of the hosting company business, I think, in a lot of ways is kind of, I think, probably on the way out. Conventionally over the last 20 years, what has been a FileMaker hosting business, it's getting to the point where most people will use Claris Cloud, or they'll do, someone will set up a server for them. But there's a hosting company called AAA, and I'm not picking on them in any way, but they were attacked, and their servers, their FileMaker servers for many, many customers were locked down. And so it caused a big mass panic and a lot of problems, and it frankly helped elevate this issue in the FileMaker community. And so there's been some interesting, I think that was a catalyst for part of this presentation, at least for me taking it more seriously than I would have, is having a bunch of FileMaker people get attacked and their servers locked down. And so I'm assuming you folks are going to kind of talk about the before, the whole agent action, and it's kind of scouting you out and all that, right? So I'm assuming the pause on air kind of stuff, you're going to hit all that, yes?
That's the next slide, actually.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think the 888 thing is worth getting into a little bit. The interesting thing to me at the time was, I thought, how lucky is that? I think they got hit around 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's when the databases are quiet. People aren't in there, they're not banging on it, knocking a bunch of transactions in, and they're like, wow, that was lucky. Everybody's databases got encrypted when, it was likely that the database cache was empty and all changes had been written, so that if they got encrypted and then decrypted, they were probably structurally sound. And, as I've, read more about this, it's like, that wasn't luck at all. If you are trying to sneak onto somebody's network or sneak onto infrastructure or servers and stuff like that, you don't want to do it when the IT force is at full attention and at their desk and watching everything. You want to do it on, Friday evening on a 3-day weekend. You want to do it at 2 in the morning or on Saturday or Sunday. You want to hit them when people aren't looking. And so this is a natural time for ransomware to happen. And so you should expect that if you're going to get hit, it'll probably be at a really inconvenient time for you, like when you're leaving for vacation or something like that. So this is sort of the MO.
Yeah. Just like someone's going to rob your house when you're not home, right? You're on vacation.
Yeah. Real quick. So for those of you, I don't know if, I'm trying to think about this. I'm making sure you guys are getting better at this presentation. I want to make sure the low-hanging fruit is get covered. So the ransomware attack, and I understand the idea they're holding you for ransom, but what happens, the bad guys essentially get on the computer, and what they're doing is they're running a program they've injected on your computer to encrypt your files, your hard drive, enough of your computer, of that server. It's not your encryption, it's their encryption, and they only have the key, and you're not going to be pay. You're not going to get your stuff back unless you pay them, right? And so I think that's fundamentally for those. Some of you here, I know, have not thought about this a whole lot. That's kind of this idea. So, you know, if they encrypt your stuff, then how do you? Well, I guess you could just reformat your hard drive, but that doesn't always work, right? So. So I guess we'll get into this a little bit more, but yeah, it's
Right.
if we have questions along the way,
Yeah.
people
just jump in. Yeah.
jump in with
And
questions.
you don't want to pay them. You don't want to pay them, right? Because if you look at the third bullet, 80% get another attack, right? Because it's a winning. It's a
Well,
winner.
and if you get your data back, remember how sensitive FileMaker files are to being opened and closed properly. The files might be, roasted. So, all right, questions? No questions? All right, keep rolling along.
All right, I believe this one's Wim.
Yep, absolutely. And Richard has alluded to some of that already, right? So the fact that you get hit with the actual encryption part of the ransomware attack, that's really the tail end of potentially a very long process and a prolonged attack on your network and your infrastructure, right? So it's obviously the most dramatic part because that's when you get locked out of your files and your infrastructure. But it really starts over on the left-hand side with different ways that they will try to get into your network or to get into a machine that belongs to one of your users. And obviously, with COVID, for instance, right? So with everybody working from home, your traditional defense of having a moat and a castle, that model has gone away, right? You have your users with their laptops working from everywhere, and nobody's home network is as secure as your traditional office network. So there's different ways that they will try to get into your infrastructure, and very often that's phishing, right? Any kind of phishing, that's the number one way that they will try to identify vulnerable people, vulnerable assets to get into and start harvesting usernames, passwords, server names, share names, all of that good stuff, right? So as soon as they have an entry point, that's when they get to the compromise. And the compromise really is, it's like a wide arsenal of things that they'll put into play, things like harvesters, right? Things that will listen for keystrokes, things that will look and go to text files and look for those AWS credentials that you may have in some shell script or anything like that. So there will be a lot of things that they'll put on your infrastructure to do that circle that's in the middle, right? So that's basically burrowing down into the first compromised machine, getting the lay of the land, figuring out what else is there, how your backups are done, where your accounts live. So there's a bunch of spreading around at that point throughout your network to really get to know everything that there is to know about your infrastructure, your users, your assets in essence, right? And at some point, when they think they have collected enough, they will put together a policy, and that'll be in the demo that we will show either later today or tomorrow. But at some point, the attack will start, right? And the attack starts from a command and control center, basically talking to the agents that they have installed throughout your network, and that's when the encryption will happen, right? And the encryption, it's important to note, is not a one-time event, right? So it's very likely that they, over the course of weeks or months, will have tried to make sure that you don't have access to your backups, right? They will have made sure that everything that you have, all your defenses that they can disable, they'll disable. They'll attack your backups first because they know that once your production servers goes down, that's when the red light comes on, right? That's when people go like, holy crap, here's a big alert. And the first order of business is to say, shut that server down, spin up another server, get a backup, only to find that your backups are gone, that you don't have your backups anymore. Or at least you can see where your backups are, but they're encrypted, they're of no use to you, right? So that whole process of the ransomware attack, the encryption it's almost the least important part. But clearly you want to be able to detect that part as well, but you want to be able to detect and protect against everything that comes before that.
Wim, could you talk a little bit about the architecture, the infrastructure of an attack and, C2 and agents and stuff like that and what the pieces are?
Yep, absolutely. The whole thing with the compromise and then the burrowing and the tunneling. So basically the middle part of that, but certainly the tail end of that, when the actual command happens, it's really about getting nasty stuff onto your infrastructure, right? And we're not talking about just putting an agent on your server, because that's what we will be using. That's like the obvious thing, but it may be any IoT device that you have that can be compromised. It may be a switch or a router that has, these things are small computers anyway, right? So if they can compromise that, put something on that they can control. And typically an agent it's either going to be a dumb thing that basically sits there doing nothing and waiting for instructions and then executing the instructions, or it can be an active thing that will do that burrowing and tunneling and report back to the command center about everything that it finds. Everything that it finds doesn't stay on the servers, right? And the actual execution of the ransomware attack, the actual encryption part of the attack, there's very little to be found of that on the machines that are getting attacked, right? It's really pulling a trigger of telling the agent, like, here's a set of instructions that I want you to do. Here's the encryption keys to use. Here are the credentials that we found along the way to use. So you typically won't find that by just doing searches on the infected machines. That's really only sent by the command and control center to the agents at the time that the attack happens. And that's just part of the strategy that they have to minimize detection, right? They want to minimize the amount of stuff that they put on the machines and leave on the machines leading up to the attack. But anything on your network, anything that is even remotely considered part of your infrastructure, is game for getting compromised.
All right.
I'll show you this website when I can share my screen, but this is a really good one. There's multiple out there. This is the MITRE attack vector, and MITRE is a non-for-profit organization that does a lot of government-funded research. I'm partial to this overview because it's such a nice way to lay everything out. The structure of this website, and I know it's kind of small, but if you do a Google, you can pull it up there. The way that this website is put together, it's from left to right, are the different phases, very similar to that infographic that we had on the previous slide. But from left to right, it's what are the vulnerabilities that have to do with identifying your assets, your users, that kind of thing, and then working its way all to the over to the right-hand side, which are the vulnerabilities that can be used to do the actual encryption. In the top section there, you can see the columns and the categories. There's a number there that represents how many of the vulnerabilities that have been identified and that you can go into. When you go to that website, you can go and read up on every individual one of them. We don't expect you to become an expert at understanding or protecting against all of these vulnerabilities, but they are great talking points, right? I would say read them, get scared, because that's what it'll do to you, but read them, get scared, and think about what it means for your typical, your own infrastructure to begin with, but certainly your clients. One of the most scary things in that particular website is the number of vulnerabilities and attack vectors that they have in the middle column, the one that the red arrow is pointing at, right? And it shows the amount of work that these ransomware attacks, and with ransomware attacks, I mean the whole chain of things, the amount of effort that they put into convincing you that they're not there, right? That's exactly what that middle column is. It's about finding your defenses and disabling all of them, right? So that none of your tripwires will trip, so that you, worst case, will not even know that something is happening, right? So they will go to great lengths to hide themselves and disable your defenses before they move on to the actual attack. And obviously, what that means is that one of your defenses is to monitor and inspect your defenses, right? It's a theme that we will repeat a few times throughout this presentation. Is a lot of what trying to defend, and if it's not defend, then at least know that something is happening, comes down to knowing what your normal state is, right? If your normal state is that, say, Microsoft Defender is always running, or your Kaspersky is always running, then you got to put something in place to make sure that you'll know when that is not true, right? Because that may be a very early warning sign that something really bad is about to happen, right? If you don't know your normal state, if you don't know your normal state in any of these, and I mean, like at the tail end, when an encryption kicks in, there'll be high CPU activity, there'll be high disk activity. By then it's too late, but at least if you have something that monitors that and knows what your normal state is in CPU activity and disk activity, if it goes abnormal, then something should tell you that. And that is true for every single aspect along this path of attack.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I guess another thing worth mentioning here, especially given this slide, so you can see how many sort of steps there are in the progression. And that is that each one of these is an opportunity for you to disrupt the attack. You can use anti-phishing training to disrupt, initial access. There are services out there that have sort of a blacklist of known malicious servers and URLs and command and control servers and things like that. And it can block access to that. And so it can disrupt the communication of the agent to the C2 server. So there are sort of steps along the way here where you can get in the middle of this and trip up the attack because it is a complex multi-step process. But that's a bit beyond the scope of, what we had talked about. But I guess we don't want to leave you with a feeling of hopelessness that, this is indefensible. It is defensible, and there are a lot of services out there that can help you with this stuff, but we don't want to get too bogged down in the details right now.
Exactly, and Heidi mentioned speed bumps earlier on in the conversation, and I think that's worth emphasizing because these ransomware attacks really are a crime of opportunity, right? They will start at the left-hand side and try to probe, right? And the more difficult it is for them to progress, the sooner they'll give up, right? Because for them, it's not worth it to spend a lot of time and effort trying to get to the end on any given a company that they find, right? They'll give up at some point if it's too hard for them to progress because there's so many other opportunities for them where these defenses are not in place, right? So that's what we mean by speed bumps.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's good. Do we have questions along the way? I want to go back to something that Wim, you said, and you kind of said it in just a little bit of enough of an accent. And I want to make sure everyone fully slow him down and comprehend what he said. He says, you need to understand what your normal is. Now, yes. If you're an end user, the end users don't give a shit about what normal is. They're using the FileMaker solution, whatever you built for them. They don't know. They don't care. It's going to be hard to convince them. I'm talking to all the FileMaker developers out there who are not just learning, but they're very serious FileMaker developers. You need to understand what that FileMaker server looks like under normal conditions. How is it behaving? What does it look like? If you have to manage 100 servers, you're going to have to automate this somehow, Zabbix or something, whatever you want to do. But you need a way of understanding, is the server look very busy? Does the RAM really full? Is the hard drive kind of half full or full? And figure out what normal looks like. So when something's not normal, it may not be a ransomware attack. Your hard drive could just be full, and maybe you should do something about it before you crash your FileMaker server. Something as innocuous as that. But we run into that all the time. We tell people buy a bigger hard drive. They don't, and then they blow up their server. So, but understanding what normal looks like, it's something that we do at RCC a lot. We haven't always done it, but if we have a good team, good staff, and we have the time, it's something that we actually focus on. It's one of the things we've been focusing on. And when I saw you pause on air, I was laughing because we were going through discussing what normal looked like, and it turns out that it depends on the server and the customer. It's a little bit different for everyone. So, cool. Any questions from anyone out there? There we go. So I'm gonna ask. Canberra's got a great question here, and it's gonna segue. I probably tee it up for you folks. Canberra 57, he's the Sandia guy, says you need to know your log file so you know what is correct and what isn't. There's a softball, Chris Moyer.
Yeah, there's a slide, later in the deck here where we talk about log aggregators and SIEMs, so Security Incident and Event Manager. And this can pull, if you are just looking at logs for a single server, you might say, that looks odd, but I don't see a significant enough pattern to sort of put a whole picture together. But if you're aggregating logs across multiple servers, you might see a count where privilege escalation happened and then it logged on to another server, a domain account got onto a local machine and gave itself admin access and access to hidden share and stuff like that. Taken collectively, those events, which might be spread across multiple servers, tell a story of, somebody up to no good. And so having a tool like a SIEM and another tool, SOAR for security orchestration, you can say, hey, if I, get the alarm bell from the SIEM, then we should say, whatever the action is, you can kick things off, you can shut off endpoints. There's a bunch of actions you can do, but you can basically automate this defense and basically put up robot security guards on your network and say, hey, I see a very questionable pattern here. I'm going to shut off that account or whatever the action is. And so there are tools out there available for you to do some of this stuff. And this gets back, this is sort of, a more detailed look at what is your normal. It's like, where did that account come from? And why is it all of a sudden accessing shares over here? Something's rotten in Denmark, no offense to Denmark, but.
Okay. Yeah, are you going to talk about those tools a little bit, or at least give us the URLs?
I'll have a slide, probably 10 slides from now that touches on those. So we'll get into that more in detail.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys.
Well, and we actually had a DEF CON recap. I found this session at DEF CON on event logging, and I thought, well, that might be a good one to watch. And it goes through the different events. He's an incident responder, but also goes through the different events of, if someone changes the admin privileges or tries to access a hidden drive, all these different events that you might want to log to the SIEM, because, if you don't log it, you're not going to have it. And so that's fine to, send it to a SIEM, but you need to log these situations that, will alert you that someone's doing something nefarious, maybe, right?
Yeah, and he is a huge advocate of maxing out your log files. A lot of people, I think the default log files, like log file size, is 20 meg, and he's like, crank it up. If you can go to 100 meg or half a gig or whatever, no incident responder ever said, what am I going to do with all these log files? That is the key forensic tool that they use to figure out what the heck happened. And so you want to make logs as big as possible and use the log aggregation tool so you are able to capture these footprints in the sand.
All right.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yep.
We will.
All right. One final thought I had is that, and that was that several years ago I saw a YouTube video of a guy named Grifter who runs the Network Operations Center at DEF CON. And it occurs to me, holy crap, if you ever wanted to earn your stripes, can you imagine trying to run the network center at a hacker conference and trying to keep people from getting up to no good? I mean, they've probably seen it all and know exactly what to look for. That seems like it would be fantastic training for knowing your normal.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Well, you were the one that's saying you would never go there with your phone, right? Your phone, a regular phone?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to have Wi-Fi turned on your phone.
All right.
But, so, I mean, we've talked about sort of generally what happens, and we wanted to get into some specifics. So a huge problem with ransomware these days, it used to be sort of ragtag, bunch of criminals and stuff like that, and they've really professionalized their approach. They stand up websites, it might as well be an Intuit website here. Hey, look at all our great features. So now these ransomware operators, it takes a lot of reconnaissance work to find targets and stuff like that. And so, their thought is, that's the hard stuff, that's the time-consuming stuff. Why don't we farm that out? And so what they do is they have created ransomware as a service. So if you want to find a target, or if you have found a target and you want to monetize that, you can say, hey, I'm going to sign up with one of these ransomware as a service companies, and I don't need to have technical know-how. These ransomware as a service places have the technical know-how. And so now these guys are competing with each other. It's like, hey, we're Lockbit 2.0. Don't go with Conti, or don't go with, Revil or what have you. We're the best. And so these are all about how great their ransomware as a service is. And so if you fire up Tor, you can find ransomware things. I don't recommend getting onto these sites. You never know what you might step in. But, this is the kind of thing. It's amazing to me that this is a criminal organization going, hey, look how great we are, and here's why you should use us as opposed to one of our competitors. And to show how great they are, they actually publish, here's some of the leaked data we have. And on some of these, the clock is still running, and if they pay the ransom, we won't actually publish it. But on others, we've published it. You can go look at the data that we exfiltrated out of one of our victims' files. And so that's pretty terrifying. And then on the right-hand side, one of the problems in the attack is that if you have very large files or something like that and you're trying to encrypt it, it takes time to encrypt it. And the longer it takes to do that, the greater likelihood you have of getting caught. And so over on the right-hand side here, they're like, look how fast we can encrypt stuff. We beat all comers. And so they've listed off all these other ransomware tools and saying, we're faster than all of them, so therefore you should use us. And so they're actually marketing themselves to criminals by saying how great they are at being a criminal. So it's just crazy to me. And so here you could have, the sort of scary, there's like 47 scary things about this, but one of the scary things about this is that it's not enough for you to have great network security and endpoint security and a good firewall. You could do everything perfectly, run a super tight ship, and then you have a disgruntled employee who thinks he got a raw deal in some fashion. He's like, I want to burn this house down. And he can go out, fire up Tor, find a ransomware provider and say, I will be happy to drop a payload on my network for you for a piece of the action. And he can infect your network from inside as a disgruntled employee. And now you got a problem. And so the fact that this is just out there, right in everybody's face and can thwart the best defense is a huge problem. And so that's why, our position is, you may have not been hit yet, but, don't bank on never getting hit because there are just so many ways for them to come at you these days. So we found this pretty terrifying. We wanted to share the fear just to get everybody to sit up and take notice. So anecdotal evidence, we talked to several people who had clients who got caught up in the 888 attack. We've also talked to people who were, just in other situations. And, Heidi, Wim, feel free to jump in on any of this stuff. But, in general, and this isn't a hard and fast rule, but in general, if you have a static file, maybe you have a product catalog that is seldom updated or something like that, and it gets encrypted and then it gets decrypted, you have a reasonable chance of that coming out the other side of that, being a usable file. It's probably not going to be corrupted because, there wasn't a lot of transaction volatility. But then you have other files which, get banged on every day and people are putting records into those. And so the cache file can be holding transactions. And if you have a database that gets encrypted with uncommitted cache transactions and then it gets unencrypted, you're probably going to have some damage. And so, in this respect, it's actually kind of a good thing that the optimal times for the attack are late at night and on holiday weekends and stuff like that, when your databases are likely to be quiet. So that's like one thing we have going for us as FileMaker DBAs and administrators and consultants, in that the pattern of, typical patterns of attack make it less likely that the databases will be in a bad state. But they can get it wrong. We heard of someone who got hit in the, you want to talk about that, Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, just like anybody else, people make mistakes. Ransomware companies, might not be as sophisticated or understand time zones well, or where companies are located. And so they might hit you during the day by accident. And they hit you during the day, you see that and you can, pull the plug, shut everything down. So, it may be a mistake, but it can still happen.
Yep. Right. And on that last bullet point there, we will talk about the log that FileMaker Server keeps on its hosted files and how it can protect against some of this encryption, but not always. And we'll talk about some of the scenarios and the different levels of intelligence, if you will, of the ransomware tools that will try to encrypt your files.
Yeah, this slide sort of drove some of our research goals, and that we like, well, in general, this is sort of, and this all makes sense and stuff like that. And it's like, are we sure that this is the case? And so, rather than have, it'll probably work out this way, we are very interested in finding out, well, exactly what is going to happen. So disaster recovery, take that for example, you should often test your backups, make sure they work, stuff like that. And being familiar with that process, makes it more likely that you're going to have a good outcome when you actually have to rely on that process. And so here we're saying, well, it'll probably work out this way. It would be a lot better if we knew how something was going to play out. And to do that, we had to be able to simulate a ransomware attack. People have heard of these things. And, as Wim mentioned, we tend to see the end of the attack. But what would be really beneficial for the FileMaker community is to be able to simulate a real life attack and say, okay, are there any opportunities for us to disrupt the attack? Is there anything we can do ahead of time to make it so that if we do get hit by an attack, that we'll have, the best possibility of a good outcome? And so we really wanted to be able to get our hands in there and run a ransomware attack on a server and see what the results were. And, Wim is ideally suited to this. He wrote Punisher. He loves to bring down servers. And he's a technical guy and is more than capable of running a ransomware framework. So this is right up his street. And he can talk about.
He hangs out with organized crime,
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
He hangs out with organized crime members and mafia, and that's all good, right? So
Yes, exactly. So yeah, we wanted to move from probably to some level of certainty, and that's what a lot of our research stuff is about: is getting to some certainty about what we can do and what's realistic to be able to accomplish. So, as I mentioned, one of the things that Heidi and I came across when we were at DEF CON this year is that for the first year they said, they agree with what I just said. They're like, look, if you're going to be able to effectively defend against a ransomware attack, it would be super helpful to be able to simulate a ransomware attack so you can, study it and learn how to respond to it and things like that. And so there are now a couple of ransomware frameworks out there. One that we found at DEF CON was called Racketeer, and Wim has started working with that. We could really experiment and say, okay, let's have databases in different states. Here's one that's relatively static. Here's one that's getting beaten on. Here's one with external stored. Here's one with not. Try a bunch of different file scenarios and attack them and see, how they come through the other side. Are they damaged? Are they not? And then we could also look at, let's see if we can erect some sort of defenses that will withstand this and maybe even hide from the ransomware so it can't even see the databases folder or the backups folder. And then if possible, this is sort of moving away from specific FileMaker defense. Is there any way where we could sort of disrupt the C2 communication so that we can sort of keep the walkie-talkie shut off and they can't even trigger the moment of attack? And so these are kinds of things that we are looking at. And then the next slide is our Racketeer demo. I don't know if we wanted to push everything to tomorrow or if, Wim, you're happy to get into it now. How much time do we have left, Richard?
It's like 10 to 5.
yeah,
right?
you get about 10 minutes or so, and I mean we don't have like a hard stop. We can stop early or go long. It depends.
Show the next slide real quick, Chris.
Sure.
Or not. Sorry, I thought it was a different slide. What happened to
this slide?
the NIST slide? Yeah, because that kind of has a a rubric to talk about the different areas, right? That you ideally catch them when they're casing the joint, right? And then you never get to the attack, right?
You're
Yeah.
so gangster.
Yeah, there's a question here, and it's an interesting question. And the question is from David Angel: is FileMaker Cloud safer than FileMaker on premise? And
that's a tough one to answer, right? Because FileMaker Cloud, as a product offered by Claris, in essence, is a managed hosting service, right? It at the core, it has a FileMaker server, but it's everything around it, the DevOps operations that they do for you and that kind of thing. It's hosted on AWS, so it can use all the AWS features to protect and have stateful firewalls and whatnot. Is it safer? You can make your on-premise or self-cloud hosted environment just as safe. So it really comes down to the opportunity to compromise on that. And you'll have just a little less opportunity because you typically don't have access to the operating system or the server with a FileMaker Cloud server. So there's just a little less opportunity to compromise that server, but it's not impossible, right? if I could drop something in a container field and get it exported and put it on the server, there's always opportunity. There's always attack vectors and attack surfaces that you can compromise. There was an article, was it today or a couple of days ago, about Microsoft Azure being compromised at the level of the servers that run the services, right? So think of AWS, your instance, whether you set up an instance yourself or you use FileMaker Cloud, that's say at this level. But there are services and servers that AWS and Microsoft, in their case, run to make that service available. So that was an attack that came in at that level. So way outside of your FileMaker server or your FileMaker Cloud server, but it can still take down your FileMaker server that way, right? So is it safer? I think we have to guard against a false sense of safety, right? So the only thing you can do really on your end is to, again, know that normal, right? Do anything you can to make sure that you understand what a normal state is versus an abnormal state. If you outsource your hosting, whether it is to something like a third-party hosting provider or Clara is doing it for you, you are giving away some of that control on the premise and on the promise that they take care of that part of security for you, right? AWS has a great set of articles and a great infographic on what they call the shared responsibility model, right? So if you're thinking about going that way for that kind of protection, I would say read up on what they promise and what they don't promise, right? And where your responsibilities start and where theirs end.
Good stuff. Really, that's a really good one, because that was not an easy answer. I was thinking about it. I'm like, wow, not an easy answer. In a lot of ways, it's how secure is your operation, right? And that's a big part of it. Yeah, good question. All right, cool. Any other questions we have? Kyle was talking about HIPAA compliant, which is not necessarily kind of the same thing, although it's like vaguely security related, right? Keep in mind, HIPAA compliance is, this United States, for the most part, North American medical kind of restriction, regulatory stuff on medical data and sharing and recovery and things like that.
If they can extort you for, not sharing the data, because if you have a HIPAA violation, you have to go through all kinds of reporting, right? And, if your data gets shared, then you've had a HIPAA violation, right? If they ransomware it and they try to extort money from you to share that data.
Right. Well, there's a thing here. Claris says Claris does not claim HIPAA compliance. Period. And I think a lot of reasons for that are they just don't want to have to deal with it, because there is a lot of paperwork and whatnot that goes into that. So, but yeah,
it's tough for them to do as well. Again, shared responsibility, right? Because the Claris FileMaker, so to speak, is a platform, right? We can build pretty much anything with it, whether it's secure or insecure as crap. Claris has no control over what happens with that. So that's an aspect of them saying, well, we can't guarantee anything, right? Because a lot of it is out of our hands.
Right. One of the reasons they really emphasize that with AWS is, right, you can put up an S3 website, leave it all public, and it's not secure. The same thing is true with a FileMaker solution. You could make a lot of data that's, stuff that's supposed to be HIPAA compliant, and you could leave it unsecured. So they have to, any platform has to have a shared responsibility model that, you need to secure it appropriately on your side.
Good points. All right, cool. Well, Kyle's off talking about HIPAA stuff. I'm just going to kind of leave that one alone as we move forward. So do we have any other questions? We probably want to wrap it today. We are kind of coming up to the end of the hour. It was good questions. Please bring your questions tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to be doing some demos. Tomorrow, Wim Decorte from Soliant is going to show us how to ransomware your neighbor's FileMaker server and to get away with it. So that's a joke. Wim, you get to smile.
Keep an eye on your server there, Richard, tonight.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually, between you and Josh Ormond, I have to be very careful. No, it's good stuff. Good stuff. So any other questions we have, folks, today? That it for today? Wim, Chris, Heidi, thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Anytime.
All right, cool. All right, we'll go catch everyone tomorrow, 1 o'clock Pacific time. See ya. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look in the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!